Now Hyundai's been on a bit of a roll with the N performance car rollout. First we had the i30N, then we had the i20N, and now we have this, the Kona N. And you might be thinking, why would you go for the SUV out of the N performance family? And that's what I was thinking too. I was going, why on earth would you get something that's taller and, you know, physics are fighting against it in the handling department? Well, that's until I spent an entire week with it, which completely changed my perception of this car for the better. To explain, I'm going to walk you around the outside features, the inside features, and take it for a drive on these roads, which are the same roads that I took an i30N manual. So it'll be a good back-to-back comparison by taking another N performance car to see how it compares against the i30N benchmark. Now with that out of the way, my name's Cameron, this is Product Review Cars. Let's get into it. Now, if you want to see more performance car reviews just like this one, make sure you're subscribed, and it really helps show your support for the channel. Most of you aren't subscribed, so if you hit that subscribe button down below, it will encourage me to go out and find roads just like this more frequently for you. Now, pricing for the Kona N starts off at $47,500. This is the Kona N Premium with a few extra creature comforts, so that means this one is $50,500 before on-road costs. Now, if you're asking what the direct competition with this is, well, there's none. It's a front-wheel drive, performance-orientated, small SUV. Unless you're looking at like a used GLA 45 AMG from Mercedes, which is still, you know, going to be considerably expensive, and also that's all-wheel drive, so it's not really in direct competition with this. It's a bit hard to benchmark this against anything else in the segment, and I think it's one of the reasons why they decided to build this is because it had no direct competitors, rather than making it a reason not to make it. If you really want something that's sort of similar, I'm looking at like Audi RSQ3s or even an Audi SQ2, but those are still fairly expensive compared to what this is asking. Now, if you think this looks pretty similar to the Hyundai Kona N line I reviewed a little while ago, you'd be right, because I've actually mistaken a few N lines for an N in hot anticipation that it might be that really cool SUV rather than one that looks cool. Well, this one is fitted out with a few exterior features which set it apart from the normal N line. And that's starting with this blacked out grille with the blacked out badge here. There's also an N badge in there as well, and some red piping along the bottom of the front bumper here. And along the side, it's fitted with specific 19-inch alloy wheels with larger brakes fitted inside. These are actually 55 millimeters bigger than the ones on the standard Kona. We've also got some body colored cladding along the side and N-specific side skirts with a little N badge tucked in right here and some more red piping. And the shoes this car is wearing are Pirelli P0 tires. They're 235s both back and front, and they also have a little HN designation on the sidewall, which means that these tires are actually for Hyundai's N division. So these tires are specifically made for this car, which is pretty cool. And then at the back is the quickest way to tell this is an actual Kona N and not an N line from first glance, because you can see this split channel spoiler up top, which is very functional with a little triangular brake light, which is bit sporty, you know, a little bit reminiscent of F1 or race cars or anything like that. You've also got an N badge just at the back here as well, and you have a special diffuser made for this car. One, obviously it's meant to look a bit sporty, and two, because it houses those massive tailpipes that we saw on the facelifted version of the i30N, and they don't just look spectacular, they sound amazing as well. So this is an SUV, so you think this is the more practical option for storage over the i30N. Well, you'd be mistaken, because this actually has less boot space than the i30N. It only has 361 litres when all the seats are up, and if you fold the seats down in a 60-40 split, you only get 1,143 litres, which is actually, yeah, less than the i30N hatchback. Well, the advantages we have here is we have a flat load floor, so there's no big sort of boot lip that the i30N has, and then that's about it. What is useful is that under the floor here, we do have a space saver spare and some little bits of storage to hide valuables. And I can tell you what, I got to flatten this the first week of having this with me, and it was very good to have a spare in the back because it just meant I could get on my way and get that tire replaced ASAP. So I do like having an actual spare tire in the back, even if it's not a full size. Now, having covered the Kona already with its interior, I'm just going to go through what's different in the N. Well, starting off, you can see the steering wheel. It's a lot smaller and it's also an N specific steering wheel. It's got some N buttons on here to jump between a couple of different modes. You got custom modes, drive modes, and N mode. And you also have this big red button here for N grin shift. I'll explain what that is when I'm out driving. We've also got a couple digital displays here. We have two 10.25-inch displays. These ones have some extra N information like we see on the other N cars with these displays. We've got an N style setup when you go into N mode, which just adds flaming graphics, a much easier to read setup with a tachometer right in front of you with your revs, and the way those gears jump at you like a Lamborghini style animation when you go to change gears. That's a lot of fun. Speaking of changing gears, these paddles, although yes, they are plastic, they are a lot of fun to use and very, very engaging. So I like them a lot, and they're mounted to the steering wheel, not on a column. And we have a heads-up display, which we've seen on other Konas, except this one has an N-specific graphic, which shows you revs, what gear you're in, what speed you're in, all that sort of stuff. So that's a cool little heads-up display, maybe something for the track or when you're out driving on these roads, so you're not constantly glancing down. I do like that a lot. And then the same with the telemetry data, and all your track data goes through on this screen here through a special N menu, which is found in this infotainment system only in the Kona N. So that's a lot of fun to read. You've got a lot of information at your fingertips, and it's just, you know, a lot of fun if you're a bit of a data nerd and just love to see what's going on with your car. Additionally, we have an N specific shifter, which has got a sequential shifting pattern. So that's pretty good if you like shifting with the gear shifter like a sequential shifter, but I'm mainly using the paddles. This is just for looks for me mainly. And then we have a bunch of different options here. Since this is the Kona N Premium, we have obviously heated and cooled seats up front, heated steering wheel, and all the sorts. We even have a little drive mode button down here to go between your drive modes such as Eco, Normal, and Sport. And if you press that, we have traction modes, which I find a little bizarre because this is a front wheel drive only car. It's not an all-wheel drive car like you find on the N line. So to have the traction buttons, I'm guessing it's just to try and get the most amount of grip when you're on slippery surfaces, depending if it's snow, sand, or dirt. Also, we have a manual handbrake here, which is pretty good, and Hyundai N are pretty proud of putting this in. You know, makes for some mean handbrake turns when you want to. And then finally, we have these N Performance bucket seats. Well, they're not as aggressive as the ones we found on the higher end trims of the i30N, and they're not like the aggressive ones in the i20N. They're just a more comfortable bucket seat, which are very suitable for an SUV like this. They have very good lateral support, and you do have adjustable bolstering. They are electric, both seats as well. Now, part of the biggest appeal for the Kona N would be these back seats, and that's because the Kona N is the hot hatch for people who don't like hot hatches. You want to drive a hot hatch, but no one else around you wants to ride in one. So what do? You get a Kona N, and that means that stepping in and out is a lot easier for older passengers or people that have mobility issues, or people who just don't like jumping in and out of a car that's lower down. Up high, I've got a good view out of the cabin, and I've also got an all right amount of knee room, although it's sort of a bit sort of encroached on by my driving position here at 5'11". These seats are well bolstered, and you know, they're a little bit grippy as well because they have some like suede material on this seat. So if we go around corners, my butt's not going to be sliding everywhere. There's a little USB and a little storage pocket here as well, and an armrest in the middle, so you can carry 5, but for 4 people, this is going to be very comfortable. And then additionally, the windows in the back go all the way down, so it just increases that feeling of being open rather than feeling like you're closed in the back of a small SUV. Now we have all these performance parts fitted to the outside and inside of this car, so let's see why that is. And so those performance parts add up to a very special driving experience. And because this is shorter and a little bit smaller than the i30N, it's actually quicker 0 to 100. So we're gonna go activate launch control here. Got specialist timing gear ready to go. And in 3, 2, and we'll get going. And in 3, 2, 1. They recorded a 6.85 second 0 to 100, claimed 0 to 100 is about 5.5 seconds. This thing is rapid, and that's thanks to that 8-speed dual clutch transmission that is found only in this Kona N and also the i30N as well. It is a wet type 8-speed DCT, and it is very effective of getting you up to speed. And so let's recalibrate here. 5.5 seconds to 100. That's just rambunctious. This is insane. This SUV is everything that I would never think a Hyundai SUV would be 10 years ago. And now here we are in a proper bona fide product made by the N Performance division of Hyundai. And so under the bonnet, we have a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder motor, very familiar unit that we've seen the i30N producing 206 kilowatts and 392 newton meters of torque. So Hyundai claims this is a flat power type motor, which means that you get your torque nice and low, and then also you get a bit of a spread for the peak power. And it actually is quite noticeable. What you get, I'll whack this into manual mode to sort of explain, is that if we slow down for a second, and then I'll explain the sensation I'm about to feel. So we're going to second gear here, we're going to go rev. The car is pulling through the rev range. And for people who go, yeah, that's what a car does, you should know that big turbocharged 4-cylinder motors used to be known for having big turbo lag. And now in here, that is pretty much eliminated because it is essentially brought on earlier with that torque, and then you get a nice peak power band right at the end of redline before you have to shift around 6,000 RPM. So it's nice to be able to use your entire tachometer rather than, you know, having to shift early. So going through some corners, this is quite a lot of fun in the Kona N because we have electronic controlled suspension, which adjusts at 200 times a second. And that is part of the reason why Hyundai's engineers thought it would be a good idea to put the N badge on a Kona, because they could use these dampers to then transform this car from being a comfortable SUV into a bit of a track weapon. And they weren't wrong. This thing corners very flat. You can go through and get a good amount of lift off oversteer as well, which has been engineered into this car, which is quite addicting. It just sort of means that you lift off the accelerator and it'll dip you into the corner. It's a absolutely engaging drive. The brakes are also nice and strong. Like I mentioned, they're 55 millimeters bigger than the standard Kona, and that means when you go to a hard brake, like which I'll do in 3, 2, 1, going for a hard brake, oh, that stops really quick. We pulled nearly a G worth of force there going for a hard brake. This is a very, very capable performance car. We have a very interesting button in here. N grin shift. I mentioned that when I was sitting in the car, and this essentially is designed to give the driver a grin on their face, which is what Hyundai says it does. So essentially it's a push to pass button because power in here is 206 kilowatts all the time. But go ahead and press N grin shift and you will increase the turbo boost pressure to then produce 213 kilowatts for a maximum of 20 seconds. So to give you an idea what that seems like, we'll go back into drive, because what this car does, you go to N grin shift, it'll drop to the lowest available gear and it'll give you 20 seconds of absolute mayhem. So let's go into N grin shift, let's just drop the gear, you can hear it aggressive, let's go. So now it's 213 kilowatts, this thing is pulling, and you can hear that exhaust going absolutely bananas out there. It's just, it's the push to pass button that you need when you're getting out of a corner and you go for an overtake. It is a really cool feature. Now, the biggest question I have is, why not have that all the time? Why not have 213 kilowatts available on tap rather than 20 seconds, which then needs a 40-second cooldown in between of using? So if I go to press it now, it says I cannot use it for another 40 seconds. Now, I'm just speculating. Maybe it's because of the sake of feature, you leave that extra little potential this motor has for a fun feature like that, or is it something along the lines of that amount of pressure is not really sustainable all the time, so we have to, you know, just use it sparingly? I'm just a bit confused of why we can't have 213 kilowatts all the time. And if you really want to have a quiet drive, you can just chuck this into normal mode, and it becomes a lot like a normal Kona, except there is a fair bit of road noise from those stickier tires that I can hear there, and the wind noise is a little bit up there as well, so you're not really going to get a super quiet experience, but you're not going to go buy a Kona N for the super quiet, supple experience, because that just seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? There's no doubt that this is a very unique car. It really is the only car in this segment that occupies the lifted hot hatch market. If you want a performance SUV, there's plenty of options, but they're all all-wheel drive and they're all fairly expensive. They're closer to $100,000, where this is sort of smack bang in the middle, and it's much more affordable for people who want a performance SUV experience. And so if you're looking for a hot hatch that's not really a hot hatch, it's lifted, it's more comfortable, it can be quiet, and it's not something that people are going to complain about having a ride in because it's too stiff on the ground, for example, well then you can go and grab a Kona N now. And that's what makes me love this car, is that yes, it is a hot hatch that will please other people driving around in it. It can be as aggressive as you want it to be, and even a little bit more agile on some turns than the i30N, but it doesn't have to be the back-breaking experience that everyone thinks it might be. Put it in the normal mode, and no one's really gonna be none the wiser apart from this N Performance Blue paint that would give this away as being a very fast SUV. And so should you buy it, consider it, or leave it? Well, considering this is the only car really in the lifted hot hatch segment, I would say go ahead and buy it, because it's a rambunctious, ludicrous example of what the N Performance department can do, and it's sincerely a very special car, and probably going to be the last version of something like this before we all go electric. An aggressive sounding, fast, petrol powered, small, affordable SUV like this isn't going to come around all too often. Now, thank you so much for watching. My name's Cameron. This is Product Review Cars. Remember to stay subscribed so you can see any more performance car reviews just like this one. I'll see you in the next one.